Okay, it looks like I think everybody is signed in now. Thank you all very much for joining us today. My name is James Robson. I'm the Victor and William Fung Director of the Harvard Asia Center, and I'd like to welcome you to this morning's panel, or evening for those on the other side of the world, entitled Nagaland Conflict and Armed Forces Special Powers Act in Northeast India. Is there a resolution for a peaceful end? So a little background on this. In the fall of 2020, I first met Bina Lakshmi Nepram, who's our one of the panelists for today. And on October 22nd, we did an initial discussion of Nagaland's history and culture that was entitled Conflicts, Activism, and Women Leadership in Manipur and Northwest India. For those who are interested, you can find a recording of that conversation up on the Asia Center website under the virtual program section. And that initial conversation allowed me to learn so much from Bina about Nagaland, which is home to about 2 million people. And I learned just an incredible amount about its long history, the beauty, the natural beauty of the place, but also its political challenges and the ongoing violence that has existed there, with a particular focus on the role of women and the leadership that they've played. At that time, the Asia Center vowed to keep reporting and fostering programming on Nagaland, so that it remains in people's awareness, which unfortunately in the United States often shifts with the winds of the news, and currently more attention being paid, a little bit to the anniversary of the coup in Myanmar, which was well-deserved attention, but also to other geopolitical issues like the situation in Ukraine or in Syria, or previously with Afghanistan. And unfortunately, the news, other news about other parts of the world, like what's happening in Nagaland, tends to drop below the headlines. Unfortunately, after a period of decreasing violence, on December 5th of 2021, just this past December, Nagaland reappeared as a place of concern in the international media after Indian Army Special Forces mistook a truckload of ethnic Nagaland coal miners for militants and attacked the truck, killing 8 miners. And then in the protests and demonstrations that followed, another 6 civilians were killed. This incident, I think, has revealed the fragility of the peace agreement that was made some 25 years ago. And it's really the goal of this panel today to discuss precisely these issues and discuss some of the background and other aspects of what's happening there to now. So in this effort, we are joined by a really illustrious panel of speakers today. And I will begin by introducing them before they give their opening comments. So our first speaker is Rosemary Zuvutu, who is a professor and former head of the English department at Nagaland University in India. And as an activist, she is a staunch defender of human rights and women's rights. Zuvutu is the president of the Central Executive Council of Nagaland University Teachers Association and a co-convener of the Global Naga Forum, an organization working for the rights of the Naga people globally. She is also an advisor of the Naga Mothers Association and a member of the Forum for Naga Reconciliation. In 2000, as part of a professional exchange program, Zuvutu visited the U.S. under the State Department's International Visitor Leadership Program, and she was also a recipient of the British High Commission's Thompson Foundation Fellowship to the United Kingdom on Conflict Resolution. She has held numerous leadership positions in the past, including being the director of the Women's Studies Center at Nagaland University, the coordinator for the Center for Mass Communication, and the coordinator of the Nagaland chapter of the Human Rights Law Network. So thank you for joining us, Rosemary. She will be followed by Niketu Iralu, who is from Nagaland. His concerns and interests are in the diverse tribes and ethnic communities of Northeast India. He strives to achieve stability and peace together in the whole Northeast region of India, with the belief that it is impossible to achieve sustained development in any state in the region without peace and stability in the whole of the Northeast Indian region. He works tirelessly with others by sharing this vision and this ideology. Iralu was the first chairman of Naga National Reconciliation Commission that aimed to resolve internal conflicts within the Nagas to reunite themselves. He has also helped in establishing the first counseling and rehabilitation centers for drug and alcohol addicts in Nagaland and Northeast India. Iralu has been active in peacemaking initiatives in various countries of Asia, Asia-Pacific region, Europe, and the Americas. The crisis in Myanmar is a matter of deep concern and conviction to him, as the Nagas and other ethnic nationalities like them on both sides of the Indo-Myanmar border face the similar challenges and dangers, as well as opportunities. The third speaker will be Zuchamo Yantan. He has over two decades of research and teaching experience. He teaches library and information science in the School of Social Science at the Indira Gandhi National Open University in New Delhi. His areas of specialization and interests include user studies, community information systems and services, communication skills, research methodology, social media and teaching and learning, climate change, and ethnography studies. Yatan regularly participates in Gayan Darshan International TV channel and FM radio Gyanvani station programs. He has developed radio content and online video programs offered in the Swayam online program, an initiative of the Government of India. He has many international peer-reviewed journal articles and books on a wide range of themes to his credit. Yantan has been associated with various national and international organizations and served as the academic and research convener of the Northeast Welfare Society and a former president of the Naga Scholars Association. He's organized and participated in several national and international conferences and seminars and has been instrumental in supporting programming activities at Indira Gandhi National Open University. The final speaker will be Bina Lakshmi Nepram, or Bina. She is currently a fellow at the Carr Center for Human Rights Policy at Harvard University, who is an Indigenous scholar and a woman human rights defender, whose work focuses on deepening democracy and championing women-led peace, security, and disarmament in Manipur, Northeast India, and South Asia. She is the founder of 3 organizations: the Manipur Women Gun Survivors Network, the Control Arms Foundation of India, and the convener of the Global Alliance of Indigenous People, Gender Justice and Peace. In 2010, Bina was initiated the Northeast India Women Initiative for Peace to ensure the Indigenous women in Northeast India are included in peace talks and the peace process. Bina has authored and edited 5 books, including Deepening Democracy, Diversity, and Women's Rights in India. Her work has garnered international recognition, including the Dalai Lama Foundation's Wiscombe Scholar Peace Fellowship in 2008, the Sean McBride Peace Prize in 2010, and in October of 2018, along with the 2015 Nobel Literature laureate from Belarus, Svetlana Alexievich, Bina received the Anna Politkovskaya Award, among other awards and recognitions. So first, thank you to all of you for joining us here today, and thank you to all of the audience who has signed in. It's really wonderful to have you today. The format for today's program will be, first, we will have opening comments from all of our panelists who will speak for anywhere between 12 and 15 minutes or so. And then those comments will be followed by a discussion among the panelists. And then there'll be time for a Q&A period for those in the audience who would like to ask questions. Please do this by typing your questions into the Q&A window as part of the Zoom function. So let's begin, and I'll turn the mic over to Rosemary Zuvutu for your opening comments. Thank you again.
Thank you, James, and good morning to many of you there, and good evening to the rest of us who are here in the evening. Thank you, the South Asia Center, for extending the invitation and for really making a conversation about Nagaland and the situation that we face this evening. It's a rare privilege, and all of us are happy to be here sharing some of our thoughts and experiences with you all. Nagaland, as you said, the Naga story had actually been forgotten by many, especially at the international circles for many, many years. Despite the fact that we are in a peace process, despite the ceasefires, there has been a lot of silence from the international community for quite some time. But when you look at the Naga conflict and the conflict here in the Naga areas, I wouldn't call it the Nagaland conflict, I would call it conflict in the Naga areas. The Naga areas spread from Nagaland itself, the hills of Manipur, 3 districts of Arunachal Pradesh, of Tirap, Changlang, and Longding, for those who are not familiar, to areas of Assam, which is the Rengma Hills and the Zemes in North Kachar in Assam, and the Naga areas of Myanmar, which actually have more than 5 lakhs of Nagas living that side. The Naga assertion of independence, as you know, began with a memorandum which was signed and delivered to the Simon Commission in 1929 by the Naga Club, declaration of the Naga independence one day ahead of the Indian Declaration of Independence, the plebiscite which was taken in 1951, various accords and agreements which have taken place in the long struggle of the Naga political armed struggle which has taken place. And we continue till today with this long drawn peace process of more than 20 plus years, various ceasefires, and this is where we are. The reaction of the government of India to this kind of conflict in Nagaland at that point of time was the imposition of the Armed Forces Special Powers Act in 1958 on the 11th of September. So from 1958 till today, 2022, we are still under the dreaded draconian Armed Forces Special Powers Act. I think no one will understand it better than the Naga people who have actually suffered, been militarized, humiliated, raped, maimed, massacred. I think if we are to talk in the language of human rights, it has been a total violation of every kind of human rights if we look back into the history of the Naga political struggle. The strange thing about this act is that India herself had gone through the act. It had been modified and passed in the parliament for the Naga, to handle the Naga insurgents, so-called insurgents they called it. And it clearly categorizes areas as disturbed, which Nagaland has always been for so long as disturbed. And there is no prosecution or legal proceedings to be taken over any of the armed personnel. They can shoot on sight, they can kill, they can come into any home, any premises without any warrant. This actually is what the Armed Forces Special Powers Act is all about. And most of the northeastern states, including Manipur, from where Bina comes from, the other areas of the northeastern region have been reeling under the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. Tripura has withdrawn the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, but the act is still active in all the other parts of the northeastern region. 2 committees have been set up by the government of India, the Verma Committee and the Justice Reddy Committee, and both have actually recommended the repeal of this act, but there has been total silence from the government of India. And as you know, it has brought about literally a recollection of the genocidal history of the Nagas, which I would really think many of us would be traumatized and terrorized to even think of hearing it, because in the midst of the militarization and the armed conflict, under AFSPA, hundreds of villages have been burned and razed to the ground, granaries burned as punishment in records of Naga political history. Women and young girls have been raped, murdered, men and youth tortured and killed. And we have a history almost like the Holocaust without the gas chambers. And I think this is something that I have always reiterated on. In 1960, in a village called Matikri, you had all the village leaders who were beheaded. And remember, we are from a nation of headhunters, and yet actually it was the Indian army that came and chopped off, beheaded the heads of all these village leaders. In the 1980s, for those of you who have been following up human rights violations, you would have heard of Operation Bluebird, where the village of Oinam and 30 villagers were held to ransom, and the same procedure happened of rape, torture, killings, women giving birth in front of the Jawans, in front of the soldiers in the pouring rain. In the 1990s, Mogjung, which is a town in Nagaland, faced arson, plundering, raping. In 2015, you had the killing of children in Wuzu, Pangsha 2015, fake encounters and killing of civilians, including 2 women who are maimed for life and who still survive today to tell their story. It was, I think, the voting incident of the 4th of December last year, which triggered again the conversation and the attention which has been given worldwide to this Armed Forces Special Powers Act. What is it really, and what does it mean to India, and what does it mean to the Nagas? For us, it is a law, a black law, which there have been numerous protests. There have been a series of legal petitions which have gone to court for which no justice has been seen. So all the incidents that I've talked about have seen the court. Until today, we have not seen any kind of justice in these kind of incidents. The Oting massacre, of which I was also a fact-finding member, I had gone to the site. It is in the Tiru coal mines. It is not on the border of Myanmar as reported by many reporters. It is actually a village which is very close to the Assam border, almost a part of the country. And it is in the first incident, you had 6 miners, coal miners, who were just shot dead, 2 of them badly injured. And then when the villagers came to rescue and find out what happened to them, the rest of the 7 were murdered on the spot by the very well-trained commandos. And on the whole, and several of them injured. The very next day in the protest, another killed, and again, several injured. So on the injury list too, you have more than 50 people and 14 dead from this particular incident. And that is again what gave, again, a huge exposure to really what happens behind the scenes, and especially what happens beyond the headlines of any kind of media coverage, what really happens in these borderlines of India and these borderlines of the country, where no one is really bothered, where the Indian army does not behave the way it is supposed to behave, and where justice is never found for victims. Until date, no compensation nor justice has ever been given to any of the victims in the incidents that we have been talking about. It is also important to look at the Nagaland and the Naga conflict and with the AFSPA as its background, because as long as you have an act that enjoys these extrajudicial powers to kill and to maim, to rape, I think the question of a long-lasting peace for the Nagas is not going to happen. We now have a high-level committee which is actually looking into the review, whether AFSPA can be reviewed. You have the Nagaland Legislative Assembly that has passed a resolution in the Assembly that AFSPA must be repealed. And then you have the public and the masses on huge protests all over the northeastern region, not only Nagaland, but all over the northeastern region, asking for the repeal of this act. Till today, the government of India is silent. Till today, the Prime Minister has not said a single word. Unfortunately, the Home Minister has given a statement in the Parliament saying that the Oting massacre by the Indian Army was actually of a mistaken identity, which is very, very unfortunate. In the background of this, where are the Nagas today? For us, peace is a priority. No matter what kind of problems that we have faced, no matter what is confronting the Nagas, peace is definitely a priority. We are the 3rd generation of Nagas. We definitely do not want our children and the next generation to be facing the militarization, the conflict, and the kind of terror that the Armed Forces Special Powers Act has brought to this region, not only to Nagaland, but to all the other states in the region, because all of us have suffered in the same way. The stories are the same, if not on a higher measure and on a lower measure, but it has all been the same. Because we are a resilient people, I firmly believe that Nagas are very, very resilient. We are deeply seeped in our history of pain and struggle, but at the same time, we look forward for peace. And that has to be the way forward. I'm very sure that has to be the way forward. And the complexity of Nagas being spread over states and 2 countries in India and in Myanmar is also an added desire that Nagas still yearn to have the Naga homeland, because that is the initial dream of the Naga movement and the Naga struggle, to self-determine ourselves and to have our own homeland without the artificial borders and boundaries. And if we are to have an environment of peace and respect, then AFSPA must be repealed. And any peace accord which is signed under AFSPA would definitely be an accord under duress, signed under duress. And this is what I see in the days ahead. This act actually has created and triggered more wars and disturbances and brought much shame to the great Indian army itself. If you look back into the history that I've been talking about, and we do not wish this act upon any other state in the country. Kashmir still reels under this act, and our solidarity is there with the Kashmiri people, and so also with the rest of the Northeast, which reels under this act. It is also imperative for the government of India to ensure that the ceasefire is not broken. And this is now our major concern, because with ceasefires which have been signed with the major group, which is the NAC and IM, the negotiations have been going on for 20 plus years. You have ceasefire, which has been signed by several Naga groups called the 7 Naga national political groups, the 7 NNPGs. And then you also have still some groups which are not in the ceasefire nor in any kind of peace negotiation. So I think that's the complexity of the Naga issue, but definitely in the days ahead, India really needs to gain our trust and also stand by its word. And my last comment is on the Naga flag and the constitution, because that is the point of contention between the negotiating parties of the NAC and IM, the major negotiating group, and the government of India. And that is where we stand before a peace accord is signed. The Naga flag, there's a great need to understand the Naga flag and what it means to the Naga people. And I'm sure many of you from different countries would really understand the meaning of your own flag, whether it's a Scottish flag, the Irish flag. In India, there's no legal prohibition that knows that any state or that any state cannot have a flag. I mean, there's no legal prohibition on that. So I think in the context of the Nagas too, that is what I see in the days ahead, that definitely can be discussed, because Karnataka as a state has its own flag, which is a Kannada flag, and is raised on many, many occasions. As far as the constitution is concerned, if you look at the Naga movement and the Naga struggle moved under the Naga Yezabo, which is the constitution. And to protect Naga rights, land and resources, customs, social practices, definitely much more than Article 371A, which is prevalent now, much more would be needed. So these are the issues that needs to be seriously thought about. And is there a possibility, is there a resolution, and a peaceful resolution at that for the Naga people and the Nagas? And I say I would not like to confine myself to Nagaland, because for the people outside the country, many would think of just the state of Nagaland. But for the Nagas, our main concern is for all Nagas who live in all these Naga inhabited areas. We definitely want to see peace. We want greater autonomy. We want respect, and definitely a resolution in the near future. And we are hopeful. Despite all that we have gone through, we are hopeful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rosemary. So we will now turn to Mr. Niketu Iralu, and I'll turn the mic over to you.
Thank you, James. Internet connection went off, so I missed a lot of the points that Rosemary gave. So I'm just coming in at this point. First of all, thank you, Harvard University's Asia Center, for the invitation to participate in this panel discussion. This special opportunity to enable a group like this one you have gathered to understand something of our worsening crisis is greatly appreciated indeed. The subject for the discussion reveals what AFSPA has done to the Nagas and their struggle for their aspirations, starting from way back in 1958, when the act was promulgated, is now starting to be done also to other peoples of Northeast India. The question asked is the main concern of this panel discussion, namely, is there a resolution for a peaceful end The question shows increasing understanding and concern for situations like ours from people far away. This is so important for us. As to how anything can be found that it is a peaceful end when all around us things are so wrong on such a huge scale, I don't know how it's going to work out as a peaceful end. It's going to be something better, and that is made to be better and better. I think that's how we have to go. But when within these 3 weeks, within 3 weeks of the outrageous Otin massacre of the 14 innocent Naga villagers, the government of India notified its decision to extend the universally hated AFSPA regime for the usual duration as it has been done since 1958. It was made clear that what the Nagas feel about their understanding of their history means nothing to the tone-deaf policymakers in Delhi. AFSPA is hated because of its insult to our human dignity, self-respect, our history, and our rights. Prime Minister Modi and his government should soon realize what's happening, that AFSPA reincarnated in haste from the British Time Rowlatt Act of 1919 by the Congress Party government in 1958 to suppress and destroy the Nagas struggling for their aspirations is not worthy of India. We and the world want and need India to give hope to the world at this time, not add to the despair taking over the world. What happened in Oting and the other similar situations of military atrocities that Rosemary narrated are so wrong that we who have lived with these kind of atrocities perpetrated on us have to find a way of protesting again and again that will challenge the thinking and conscience of India. And that has to be done in other nations where such evils are being perpetrated. But I am concerned that while we can condemn what is so visible and so to speak, easily condemned because it is so wrong, we can lose sight of the areas where we ourselves have to be growing properly. I feel that is where I see a new thinking has to be claimed by every citizen, every person, ordinary man or woman, who will say that the right thing to happen in our societies cannot be just left to the people we call leaders. And then we live in a way that will not make things, make change impossible. I think that kind of a thing where our societies, especially emerging societies like the Nagas, who are just entering the modern history, that we grow steadily, properly by accepting disciplines that we should learn to live with. I think I will end at this point, as that is the area I want to explore with whatever strength I have after so many years of being engaged in this struggle and the fight to bring healing and reconciliation to unite our peoples, not just in Nagaland, but in the whole Northeast, because the whole Northeast made up of ethnic nationalities and tribes with aspirations that are so strong in each of them, we have to find a way of growing properly together with goodwill for one another, instead of adopting divisive thinking and ways that will make development impossible. I'll stop here at this point. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Niketu, for those comments and also for your ongoing dedication to all this important work. So we will now turn to Zuchamo Yatan's opening comments. Thank you very much for joining us from New Delhi, Zuchamo.
Well, respected moderator, Professor James Robson, esteemed panelists, and viewers from across the globe. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from New Delhi, India. First of all, I thank Asian Center, Harvard University, for initiating this pertinent topic, AFSPA, where the indigenous people in Northeast have been experiencing injustice, living under militarization for the last 60 years. I'm a firm believer in the saying which says, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice anywhere. These words from Martin Luther King, Jr. are a reminder that we all have a responsibility to take a stand when we witness injustice. Thank you, Asian Center, for also giving me this platform to share my perspective on Armed Forces Special Power Act, the robbing of democratic rights of the ethnic minorities in the Northeast India. Well, after I got invitation to speak at this webinar, I did a public opinion survey on AFSPA in Nagaland and also Manipur, the two states where the law has been most consistently enforced since 1958. The feedback I received was empathetic on two counts. First, almost all the respondents condemned AFSPA as a violation of their civil and human rights, therefore unconstitutional. Secondly, that the law is particularly oppressive of the ethnic minorities of a particular region, that is the Northeast India. So according to the respondents, AFSPA has created a culture of violence and disregard for human life, leading to fear, distrust, and public unrest in the region. In other words, in the eyes of the people, AFSPA has operated as an extra judicial law that is designed to perpetuate itself. It empowers the army to use lethal, force against civilians with near total impunity, and the exercise of that power by the army produces public unrest, including armed, resistance. Well, the Indian government uses, the public unrest and resistance of AFSPA as the basis for declaring the area as disturbed under the Disturbed Area Act of 1955, which in turn becomes the justification for the government to impose and repeatedly extend AFSPA in the region. In fact, this has been the repetitive, tragic story of AFSPA in Nagaland and the Northeast India for over 6 decades, and the Oding of Mon killing, which is in Nagaland, being the latest one. In fact, because of which it has captured the attention of the world, and because of which we are discussing this issue to find a solution to the challenge ahead of us. So let me get straight to the question of the webinar, that is there a resolution for a peaceful end? The answer is yes, but it will be a difficult journey. It will be unrealistic to expect solution coming from one isolated action or a grand, event. It will be, it will have to be a process building an unintentional, bad way of peace with sincerity for addressing the deeply entrenched history of repression, bloodshed, and a bad blood created by AFSPA in this region. But before a peaceful resolution and healing can begin. The bullet lodged inside the body of the Northeast must be first removed. That means it really requires a healing. So what I am saying, is that the only way to a peaceful resolution, of the problems is demilitarization in the region, and starting with the rebel of AFSPA. And that is to say, remove the bullet, but repelling AFSPA will not automatically heal the deep wounds, which is the result, of living half a century under militarization. And the necessary demilitarization process needs to be accompanied by a truth and reconciliation commission aimed at uncovering and recognizing many ugly truths, wherever they are buried. And a commission, along that line would create a fair and empathetic environment for the stakeholders to meet, in good faith. In fact, it would provide a safe space for dealing with the hearts, removing the bad blood, and making peace together for a better future. And the reason a peaceful resolution needs to be a pathway rather than a one-time solution is because the disturbed areas Act and AFSPA are state-sponsored instruments for controlling and keeping in check a sensitive region between India and China, which is a homeland to a few hundreds of indigenous groups speaking hundreds of languages and have been terribly burdened, living with a complicated and a controversial political history for over 7 decades. And what I'm describing here is a scenario that is, that is familiar to historians of indigenous peoples in many parts of the world, specifically the way in which indigenous people have been regarded and dealt, with by external state powers for, national agendas. And since this conversation is being hosted by Harvard University, an American university, we can call for a moment the long history of injustice Native Americans suffered at the hands of the US government by citing two sources that represent, the relationship from early 19th century and the late 20th century. In 1823, John Marshall, a distinguished American politician and Chief Justice, got it. But the tribes of Indians inhabiting this country were fierce savages whose occupation was war and whose subsistence was drawn chiefly from the forests. To leave them in possession of their country was to leave the country in the wilderness, unquote. But in 1988, this was the way the US Senate paid tribute to Native Americans with a resolution that said, quote, the confederation of the original 13 colonies into one republic was influenced by the political system developed by the Iroquois Confederacy, as were many of the democratic principles which were incorporated into the Constitution itself, unquote. We might say that today some resolutions have been reached, between the US government and the Native American, even though it was not with the best possible outcomes. Well, using this America scene as the backdrop of our understanding of AFSPA in Northeast India, it would rather be like stationing the US Army in Native America reservations and empowering the armed forces to search public premises and private homes without a search warrant and to arrest, shoot, and even kill Native Americans on their own land, simply on suspicion of their engaging in anti-government propaganda and activity. And of course, this does not happen in the United States today, but it has been happening in Nagaland and Manipur and in most parts of the Northeast India for over 60 years. Well, the oppression has become a way of life with the government of India, as AFSPA has been normalized in the region. Even with the end of colonialism in India, the British colonial rule is a permanent fixture in this part of India. The indigenous people living in this region not only feel their rights, being violated, but they continue to face even much worse under, post-colonial India. Nagas have experienced aggravated and heightened levels of colonial, rule with extrajudicial, law like AFSPA and the Disturbed Area Act. And through this law, post-colonial, India lays their claims, the right to rule over the indigenous ethnic minorities, considering it as an important to its, national security by robbing of their democratic rights. So what I am saying is, of course, nothing new. Several historians and social scientists have widely written about it, and most recently by Sanjeev Borua in the book titled In the Name of the Nation, India and its Northeast, published by Stanford University Press in 2020. Borua notes, during British colonial rule, occasional military expeditions to teach the tribesmen a lesson were the standard tool of maintaining order in some part of the excluded areas, including the Naga Hills, unquote. He then adds, this terrible history was behind the disastrous, decision to respond to the Naga rebellion with full military force, unquote. The highly destructive military decision Borua is referring, to happen. It happened in the mid 1950s, by which time S.B.N. Mullik, the Indian Intelligence Bureau chief, who served under Prime Minister Nehru, reports, the war with Nagas had started. According to Mullik, though there were nearly one security troop for over every adult male Naga in the Naga Hills, Yunsang area, there never was a time when it could be claimed that a Naga guerrilla had been broken into submission, unquote. This was in 1957. The following year, 1957, AFSPA was enacted and imposed in the region. 63 years later, we are still talking about the need to rebel AFSPA. And not only that, according to Dolly Kikon and Sanjeev Borua, two experts from the region with extensive knowledge of the subject, the powers gave the armed forces under AFSPA are now being exercised in the Northeast by the Central Industrial Security Forces, we call it CISF, a force designed to protect the country's economy infrastructure, including airports. They were meant for basically to protect the country's economy and infrastructure. And as well as by the Assam Rifle State Police during the compilation of the National Register of Citizens, call it NRC. So AFSPA is becoming the law of the land in the Northeast India. One might wonder about what the people of the Northeast have done to help themselves against AFSPA and for peace. Many individuals have taken extraordinary steps. For example, Urom Sharmila of Manipur, whose hunger strike was intermittently, strategically foiled by the government, so that she was forced to abandon her mission after 16 years of fasting. So for many decades in the region, the public had appealed to authorities, staged demonstrations, went to court, and also protested. Even the UN Office of Human Rights, has urged the Indian government against AFSPA as it contravenes human rights. Armed resistance groups have signed ceasefire agreements. The most notable one was between the government of India and the NSC and IM in 1997, which of course produced the 2015 Framework Agreement. On that historic occasion, on 3rd August 2015, Prime Minister Mr. Narendra Modi said, quote, "I have deepest admiration for the great Naga people for their extraordinary support to the peace efforts," unquote. But 6 years into the negotiation with NSC and IM for a resolution for a peaceful end of the Indo-Naga political problem, and immediately following the Odin killings in Nagaland, the Modi government has extended AFSPA in Nagaland against the recommendation of the state government and the Naga public. This is the current background and reality check that makes necessary, the immediate rebel of AFSPA, followed by demilitarization process, along with a Truth and Reconciliation Commission charged with building a pathway, to peace in the region. Any effort less than that is unlikely to produce a peaceful end to the problems that have become, the endemic. Thank you very much. With this, I end my presentation.
Thank you very much, Zuchamo, for those really thoughtful comments. I'm sure we'll have many questions once we get to the Q&A period. So I'd like to turn now to our final speaker. And I should also say, before Bina begins, just to extend a thank you to her for, she was really instrumental in bringing together this group of really esteemed panelists for today. So in addition to your comments today, Bina, thank you very much for all you did to help organize the panel today. And I'll turn the mic over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Good evening and good morning, good night to everyone who's tuning in. And really, really wonderful and painful to listen to our earlier speakers. These are, all of them who spoke before me are people I deeply admire. These are people who have really worked on the ground, not just in library or internet struggles. These are people who have really gone out of the way to bring peace in the region. So I'm so glad. Thank you, James, and thank you, Tenzin, for making this happen. It was my bounden duty to ensure that our voices are heard. I will not take a long time, but I will share some of the concerns that I have. So first of all, really, my salutations to the Naga people. We have absolutely led the way in the entire northeast of India of what it means to struggle for our rights. You have shown it to the world what it means to fight for your rights. But I also want to reiterate what Uncle Nikatu has said, that this fight is not just for the Naga people, but for the people of 45 million indigenous people living right now in northeast of India, who have been facing these problems for a long time. But again, it was the people, the Naga people and the people of Manipur, who actually brought it to actually international attention. And many of them, the names have been written. Today's focus that I'm going to share is the conflict as well as this Armed Forces Special Powers Act. It's only 4 pages of A4 size, passed for the first time in 1942 to thwart Mahatma Gandhi's Quit India movement. How come a 4-page document has destroyed our past, our present, and as Dr. Rosemary had said, led to so many killings. I became a scholar and an activist, not because I wanted to become one. I wanted to be a physicist, but the amount of killings, the day I was born, there was military curfew. I grew up near the Hairangoitong massacre site. And my current ancestral house is next to, in Sagolman, where it is known as Killing Fields of Manipur. And I visited so many conflict tombs, not only in Manipur, but across the northeast of India, where families have been wiped out, killed. And as many of our speakers said, no one has been brought to justice for this kind of crimes committed under the shadow of AFSPA. And this is what I'm going to focus my attention. So let me again repeat, this 4-page paper is for me an instrument of what Michael Foucault would say, a technology of killing. A technology of killing in 4 pages, handed down in 1958 in the Indian Parliament to control 45 million people of northeast of India, and first imposed in the Naga hills. So the Naga people have really suffered beyond many of us. And then in 1990 is now currently imposed in Jammu and Kashmir. So in entire India, these are the 2 areas where this act is there. So first of all, the existence of the Armed Forces Special Power Act is a proof of what Quijano would call the coloniality of power. It's the British left India after 200 years of British rule. Now, after the British left India, we didn't say bye-bye to them. Government of India in Delhi took the British laws and imposed it on 45 million people in the northeast of India. This is what government. So in short, I would like to declare today that we are still living like a colony of India. Because the reason why I say this is, how can you justify a martial law in the world's largest democracy, in quotes, number one. Number two, there are over 300,000 troops. I repeat, 300,000 troops of the Indian Armed Forces on the Naga people, as well as entire Northeast. In Manipur, for every 20 Manipuris, there's 1 Indian Army personnel. Such is a ratio of heavy militarization in the area. So we are, and many of the colonial, decolonial, and post-colonial theories, which come from India, do not talk about us. They do not talk about us. So we are not, and Gayatri Spivak once wrote an article which says, can the subalterns speak? Now, we would like to pose the question, can the indigenous people of northeast of India speak? Our tongues, our histories have been completely absent from the narrative of India. That's why we are not able to understand what is happening there outside the 4 corners of India. We are called secessionist. We are called all sorts of names for asking the government of India to adhere to its own principles. So that is what is happening. The northeast of India is in a file in the European Union called World's Forgotten Crisis. I went to find out. Why is it? We are a region which is bordering 5 countries. We have China on the top. China still hasn't recognized Arunachal Pradesh as a part of India. Look at that. And we share borders, the northeast of India shares borders with 5 other countries. And everyone heard about the Rohingya crisis, but right now, more than 400,000 people have been internally displaced because of this 6 decades of conflict. I have visited many areas in Assam. I visited many areas in Arunachal Pradesh as well as Mizoram, and particularly in Assam, where so many hundreds of thousands of internally displaced people are there. India hasn't signed the Refugee Convention, so they're all staying in schools and makeshift places for decades, yet the world doesn't know about us. So Asia beyond the headlines is where we are. And this is one of Asia's longest running armed conflict, yet we cannot take this issue out. We are threatened for speaking about this. So even this seminar itself, James, may be taken as a testimony against us, but some of us have to speak truth to power. If not, then the next generations of people who are living in our part of the world will have no peace, like many of our earlier speakers have said. The other thing that I would like to share is that we are like, the protest after protest that we have done for decades in the northeast of India has gone to deaf ears, fallen on deaf ears. We cannot understand. We have had several meetings in New Delhi, including the Prime Minister's office, the present, not the present one, the former ones. We have had series of conversations where we had victims of this Armed Forces Special Powers Act speaking with military people. Even military people are saying that this is not helping us. Yet, why is government of India hell-bent, in spite of the Naga people, in spite of Nagaland Assembly passing the law, passing a resolution to repeal it? Why is it continues to be extended? It's a question that we have to ask. Only an insensitive nation state will do this, because we have no other ways right now. Because the Armed Forces Special Power Act violates Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. It gives every Indian the right to life. So the question we would like to ask is, who's othering us? In fact, the people of Northeast have been subjected to racial discrimination, and AFSPA, for many of us who've been working on it, is a form of a racist law, which is contravening India's own constitution, and also the Declaration on the Rights of Human Rights, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, of which India is a member country. It is a violation. The imposition of AFSPA is a violation of the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. Article 30 of the UN Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People says, no militarization on indigenous people's lands and territories. Government of India, being a member of the United States, United Nations, have repeatedly contravened all of this. Even ICC, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, India is a state party. And even ICP has also mentioned that we should repeal. The Human Rights Council have called it as a discriminatory law and asked to repeal it. Even the two committees which Rosemary has mentioned and past speakers have mentioned, the Verma Committee as well as the Jivan Reddy Committee, and many other committees have asked for the repeal of the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. And during the Delhi gang rape of 2012, when a young 21-year-old paramedical student was gang raped in the streets in the bus in Delhi, the Justice Verma Committee report has said that the imposition of Armed Forces Special Powers Act have led to the sexual violence of indigenous women in India's northeast and should be repealed. It's right there. The intersection between gender violence and a militarized martial law, which has led to so many of our women and men being sexually abused and tortured and killed and disappeared. In Manipur, we have a group called FIDAM, which is the families of disappeared. We have a group called IFAM, which is Extrajudicial Killing Association. Look at them. And my organization is called the Manipur Women Gun Survivors Network. Why are we setting up these organizations like this? Is to bring home this kind of entrenched violence which has been happening. So my entire life has been dedicated literally towards trying to find solutions. And that's what I would end. So the solutions are like this, as follows. And these are some solutions are being uttered for the first time, so it may come as a deep shock, but here we go. First of all, I agree totally with Zamo. Truth and Reconciliation Commission to be set up in all the states of northeast of India, where human rights violations have happened, so that we could come to healing in terms of our killing of our loved ones. I have lost family members in this conflict. I have lost friends in this conflict. And we are not going to make this go on, because that's not the future we want to live to our grandchildren and to our children. Number two, there are 17 peace talks in India's northeast, and not a single woman, indigenous woman, is in those peace talks. We say no to peace talks in India's northeast without the inclusion of indigenous women in these peace talks. Number three, hold the political parties in the northeast of India accountable. Vote them down if they do not have the courage to stand up for the people of Northeast and to ensure that they negotiate with the government of India on this. We are not pawns in their hands. Number third is very, very important, that we are calling for lawyers to work as a team. We will be taking evidences, and we will take agencies, individuals, people, military, paramilitary, anyone who has committed crimes against humanity in the Naga areas, as well as in the Manipur and Northeast, to the International Criminal Court. The Rome Statute is for us, for all of us. If nation states are not able to provide justice for the people of the Naga people and the people of Northeast of India, then we will take them to the International Criminal Court, and we're preparing ground to work with a team of lawyers to do this. As Rosemary said, justice has never been given to us. And there is a saying, there's no peace without justice. So, and finally, I recently discovered that the Genocide Convention of 1948. India is a signatory of the Geneva of this Genocide Convention and ratified it. It should have made into a law, but it didn't. And we call upon the government of India to stop the genocide of the Naga people, stop the genocide of Manipur people, of the people of entire Northeast, so that we can continue to heal and lead our lives. And most importantly, is to know that the issue, whether it's Naga conflict or the conflict in Manipur and the entire Northeast, is a part, it's a process of what Martin Luther King said in his Nobel Prize acceptance speech. 4 quadrants, which makes the world, the pain that we are in: colonization, militarization, patriarchy, and and racism. These are what is leading to a continuum of violence. The entire Northeast is an area which is extremely resource-rich area. It has given India its first tea. It has given India its first oil. There is huge natural resources in the Northeast of India. So the fight for peace and justice it cannot be done by one indigenous group alone. It has to be done collectively. The Nagas, the Manipuris, the Kukis, the Tiprasas, people of Arunachal Pradesh, Sikkim, everyone uniting to be able to negotiate with India, which is supposed to be the world's largest democracy, to see that no to demilitarization, decolonize indigenous territories, and demilitarize, and ensure that we get the justice that we deserve. And we will fight till the end to make this happen. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Bina. I'd like to bring back all the panelists now then and give you the opportunity to see. I know that you heard many different ideas from each other about different aspects. I think I heard there are some common themes here, and I think some of the key issues are apparent to all. I think some of the most egregious examples of violence and problems that Nagaland is facing. But I just wondered if any of you had comments or a response or elaboration on anything that your fellow panelists have said. And then after that, we still have plenty of time, and I'll get to a few questions that have come in by our audience today. Feel free to, if you would like to comment, just unmute yourself and speak.
Actually, I would like to request Uncle Nikiti Iralu because he has this beautiful house, which is called the House of Listening. And because of colonization, all the Northeast people are connected to Delhi by flights, mostly. We meet more in Delhi than with each other, number one. Number two, our histories are not in Indian textbooks, so we don't know about each other. So there's always this. So I think really important work for the present and future of Northeast, and I would love him to really share what he has been doing in terms of peace and reconciliation in the Northeast.
Well, I think our house, we are inspired. The people from different parts of Northeast India do come here to sit down together, listen to one another, and get to know one another at the human level. I think that is something we have to widen and keep on doing. Because I think what we need is, we must make sure that we, what I would call a wider common stability, which is possible because we all contribute to make that work. Otherwise, we can spend all our lives calling buns, as we call in India, so that our neighbors can't move cross through our land, and we think that's the solution. But these are not sustainable plans. I'm interested in developing that kind of understanding. I think that kind of thing comes when we just say that we want to hear from you, even what you think about us, where you feel we need to be different the way we have lived so many years next to each other. And because, as they say, love is blind, but neighbors are not. And so that kind of an approach will produce wonders, I believe. I'm most interested in the people we have met so far in our home. Métis and Nagas meet often here, and we have Assamese come. We have the different fighting factions come. And what we find is that if we can somewhere say that with all the conflicts dividing us, if somebody can say on this one issue or two issues, not you, not your tribe, not your people, your faction, or your village, but we, my side, we are wrong, not you. So we are sorry, please forgive us. I think that opens the connection. Otherwise, we know how to go on and on dialoguing, but never going deep enough where with mutual trust and mutual goodwill, desire for the other person also to grow properly is not achieved. And if we do not have goodwill and trust, all our ideas will lead to great disappointment, because we have the capacity to, Bina mentioned, killing fields that we create for one another out of our own heel hurts. It's a greatly beautiful, diverse group of people here. And in Burma, exactly the same. And I think we must claim some ideas that will enable us to solve our problems. Why not? Through a better growth of human beings. And then we will give hope to those who are all around us. I think that's what I would say.
Wonderful. Thank you, Niketu. I think this issue of just bringing people-to-people contacts as a form of understanding and dialogue, and including the most oppositional parties, it takes a lot of work and bravery, but it's, I think, one of the best ways to surmount some of these key issues. So thank you for the work that you're doing there. Would anybody else like to respond? And then I have a number of questions as well. Yes. It looks like either Zuchamo or Rosemary, I think one of you.
Yeah, I would like to respond to what
okay,
Bina
then Zuchamo, said. Yeah.
Would like to respond to what Bina had said. I agree with her on India always looking at us as the other. That is something which has been very significant. But I feel that all of us here, it is also important to look at the political issues that we are facing in our own states and in the region, because the Armed Forces Special Powers Act cannot be seen in isolation when we are also having our own unresolved political issues. The peace negotiations, which I have mentioned, has been going on for so long. And as long as it remains unresolved, we are still going to have many, many more encounters with AFSPA. That is very clear in the kind of interactions we've had with the Prime Minister, the present Prime Minister too. The Global Naga Women's Peace delegation had met various leaders, and it was very clear that the Armed Forces Special Powers Act is going to stay until we have some kind of a peace settlement. That is one. In Manipur too, we already have so many different groups. How many are going to come into the peace process and how many are on the negotiating table is also a huge concern. The Bodo Accord, the Karbi Accord, I think are indications in Assam where, you know, the kind of militarization that we had seen in the past, I think is much lower now because of these accords being signed. And that is why I still feel that, you know, these settlements are important at the same time while we also lobby for the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, because it is our right to demand for it. The importance of having, Bina had mentioned, thank you, Bina, for always being so vocal on these issues. For me, I'm getting tired probably because we have also deposed before the Burma Commission. We have, been lobbying with the Indian government, with our armed groups, and, the kind of journeys that we have taken. Women being a part of the peace process and being a part of the peace negotiation, I think, is vital, particularly for the Northeast. And the very fact that we are a very strongly patriarchal family, patriarchal system in all of us except the friends in Meghalaya, it is also seen that women have always been hovering around the peace table and not really being a part of it. But I think in the Naga context, to a large extent, after the Naga Mothers Association had actually brought up this very strongly of women's right to peace and security and the inclusion of women at the negotiating table, we did have some of the women Kilonsers actually join the political groups at the peace negotiation, which was a surprise. And our suggestion to the peace interlocutor, the last interlocutor, that women actually from the Indian side too, why not? Because we speak different languages. Women at the peace table would speak of different issues rather than what the men were envisioning for the future. And therefore, that was taken probably like a big joke, and it was never, seriously considered from the Indian side. But those are the kind of concerns that I do share with you. Definitely a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, I think, is what we are looking towards in the days ahead. The fact that many of these incidents of massacres and crimes have actually not been able to bring the armed forces into the civil court is something that we need to really seriously look at, because fortunately for the Manipur fake encounter, the Human Rights Law Network with Dr. Colin has been able to bring success to a large extent, where you did summon the armed personnel to the civil court. And this is what we are looking for in the Oting massacre. In the Oting massacre, the Nagaland police actually have come up with a lot of evidence, and we hope in the coming days we are going to see an investigation report, which actually is going to be very different perhaps from what the army has found out, is one. The massacre with the evidences and the fact-finding reports have also been submitted to the UNHRC. We've also got a response by the Global Naga Forum, and we have already received a response also from the Special Rapporteur. And the Special Rapporteur over the years, be it on women's issues or even be it on AFSPA, I think as far as the UN Special Rapporteurs have been concerned, they have been very vocal. A number of statements have actually been also submitted to the Government of India. And we hope in the coming days too, we will see this. For a political activist like me, besides being a peace activist, I still feel that it is also important, while we speak and fight against the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, we cannot speak about the AFSPA in isolation. Because in our own areas, in all of the Northeast states, we do still have political issues unresolved, for which we have struggled for so long, and particularly the Naga people. And that is what I see in the days to come, that if there is a political resolution and a peace to look forward to, then definitely the government of India has to come down and repeal and withdraw AFSPA from the areas. And when I talk about Nagaland, I'm also talking of all the other northeastern states where we have all come out in unison. After the Oting massacre, there has been even a spearheading of protests throughout the northeastern states. And I think one very positive development is also the instant reaction of the younger generation. Generations who actually have not seen the kind of history that we have seen have come out spontaneously to the streets, have organized walkathons, mass protests, mass rallies throughout the northeastern region. And I think these are signs, I would still think that these are signs the government of India needs to take seriously, because these are trigger points and these are signs of what may happen in the future if the Northeast is not taken seriously.
Thank you very much, Rosemary. And then Zuchomo, please go ahead, and then I'll pose some questions.
Okay, basically, I would like to just seek some clarification from Professor Rosemary, because she has been a part of the, the finding committee. So she has also mentioned about the fake, encounter, or also the mistaken identity. Just would like to ask her, what is your observation on that, regarding whether it is a fake encounter or whether it was a mistaken identity, which was also stated by the Home Minister, Amit Shah. Yeah, I would like to hear from you. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, thank you.
definitely.
Oh, sorry, just for a minute, Rosemary. I would just say, Zutumo, thank you for raising that, because that is also one of the questions that came in by our audience as well. So thank you for raising that. I think it's on people's mind, right? It seems like a convenient excuse. So Rosemary, please, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, James, on the 11th of December, a joint independent fact-finding team of the Naga Mothers, the Global Naga Forum, and the Naga Students Federation had gone to Tiru Valley, where the incident took place, and spent the night in Oting, meeting victims and meeting victim families and village leaders. The media, as well as the Indian politicians, have actually stated, even on the floor of the parliament, that it was a mistaken identity. It definitely was not a question of a mistaken identity. It was a pre-planned, well-planned ambush on innocent civilians, because that is not, there were media reports which actually talked about this place being on the border of Myanmar. It is nowhere near Myanmar. It is actually, as I said, on the border of Assam, leading down to the plains. It is a route not taken by armed groups. It is actually a route that is only taken by coal miners to the coal mines in Tiru Valley. It's a huge area of coal mines which belongs to Oting village. Oting village actually has land which extends down to the valley bordering Assam. So this is the only route which is taken by coal miners, and many Assamese from the plains of Assam also come as daily wagers to the coal mines. So actually there's a whole lot of exchange of these daily wagers there. So one, it wasn't a case of mistaken identity. There were no police checkposts or nor any army checkposts along that route. It was a wide open road, wide open space. There were no forests. Many people think that, Nagaland means thick forests, thick jungles, and that's how an encounter takes place. It was not. It's just open cardamom fields and tall grasses, where this coal mines, were situated. And that was where the road, where in a small turning where the ambush took place. They actually openly fired upon the miners from an upper ridge, and that was how they managed to kill these young men. The question of the fake encounter came up, and why I was reiterating it is because we also interviewed many of the villagers who came down to rescue and find out what happened to their friends. In the first incident, they shot dead 6 of the young men, seriously injured 2, and since 8 of them had not come home, the rest of the villagers around 8:30 came down again to the valley, and it was there that they found the army trying to dress. And in fact, they had already dressed some of these young men in camouflage and in army boots, and some of them were half naked. And for a period from 4:30 when the incident happened till almost 8:30, which was a period of around 4 hours, the army had not left the place and were busy, trying to actually stage a fake encounter. And this is something very common in the Northeast, in Manipur. Manipur has seen so many of it. Nagaland, we have seen so many of it, where they will ambush, they will kill, and then they will lay arms near them. They will, put on uniforms, maybe put down some guns, army boots, whatever, and then claim that it's an encounter. And that was the first report from the army, which said it, but it was not at all. And these are statements from witnesses who had gone down. And imagine these are commandos, trained commandos. 21 para commandos are the most well-trained ones. And with the kind of sophisticated guns, the kind of sophisticated searchlights that they had, it was after dark when they gunned down again the second 7 victims. They were literally spraying bullets, running after these villagers who had come down. There was a confrontation. The villagers did not like the youth being dressed up, hidden under, a huge tarpaulin. So when they discovered all this, definitely there was a lot of fighting among themselves with dows and, the others spraying bullets. Many of them got killed. They were chased. And many of the witnesses who actually reported to us in the village as well as in the hospitals made it very clear that the army went madly towards Assam, spraying bullets at everyone whom they saw on the way, including Modi's own party president, the BJP president of Mon district. And I hope by now he has resigned from the party. But he actually, despite the fact that he had a BJP flag on his gari, and despite the fact that he claimed and said that I'm just a civilian and I'm from the party, the army would not listen to him, and his companion was shot dead in front of him. He was shot dead, So the kind of horror stories that we have come back with, and the kind of fear, the kind of terror that the villagers faced in such a situation, I think it's something that cannot be explained away with. No amount of explanations from the army is acceptable at this moment in time. And I think it is also the same with the Konyak Union, who have actually brought out a very strong statement. They've had joint meetings recently with the army, the civil administration, and the Konyak tribe, but they've made it very clear, until perpetrators are brought to justice, there is no question of allowing the army also to move around.
Thank you, Rosemary. So we're down to very little time left, but and it sounds like I would love to be able to carry this on for another hour. It would be wonderful. I think I can sum up, if it's okay, there were almost 10 to 12 questions, and I'll try to generalize in a way that I think will bundle many of them together, because I think there was a general sense of a question that is really about the possibility of using the political infrastructure, say the state legislative assemblies, state government, along with civil society organizations, in an attempt to try to revoke the AFSPA. But what are other cultural either challenges or opportunities that might be faced beyond just the purely political? In other words, how united are the peoples of Nagaland together in this kind of opposition, and particularly in shaping a kind of modern Nagaland identity with language and bringing people together? I know Niketu had spoke about bringing people together for conversation. Maybe some thoughts about what are some of the challenges that have been faced, and what are the opportunities that you see for those both political and cultural sides of this problem.
James, anyway,
yeah. Rosemary, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Bina, why don't you go ahead? Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yes. Ing Benny and Sunny had raised this question in the chat. I think, and that's something that we have been invested in the last 10 years. We made it a point to actually visit each and every state of the northeast of India, and not only meet people who are in the capital cities, but actually go to communities, really, really rural communities. So we visited each of the 8 northeasts, because otherwise no one would do it for us. It takes a person from Sikkim to come to Manipur. It takes him 3 days, but from there to New Delhi is like 2 hours and 3 hours by flight. You reach Delhi. So New Delhi had actually done this policy even in terms of our books. So I think one of the things we can do is to understand one another. We do not know each other's songs. We do not know each other's stories. The colonial divide and rule of making the indigenous people of northeast of India separate with our own identity has been, kudos to government of India, they did it. We did a whole campaign called Weaving History Northeast of India, so that we understand each other. In fact, I think if Rosemary may agree, when women from Manipur, Rina and all came and met the Naga women for the first time, I think the Naga mother said, I thought we were enemies, because always the political field is to put one ethnic group against the other, And this is what a very, very colonial divisive policy has been going on. So we get to demystify that by actually connecting more, and we do it by We don't do it always by being on the streets, but by sharing a meal, visit each other's homes. That's why I love what Uncle Nikato had done in the House of Listening. We have to visit one another, invite one another, understand each other's, and we are currently undertaking a task to, our folk tales, our stories, our strength and resilience, our medicines, our way of life to be shared. And I think the Naga's Hornbill Festival, which in Nagaland, which started, became a way of many communities to also come and understand one another. So we got to continue to do that. It's really, really important. The struggle is internal as well as external, and in both. But right now, what is really major is to understand why this Armed Forces Special Powers Act, it's what, again, I quote Foucault, it's a technology of killing in 4 pages. And we have to confront this together, because as one of our panelists said, even Nelson Mandela said, only free people can talk to one another. We cannot have democracy at gunpoint. We cannot have peace talks at gunpoint. And so we have to demilitarize within and outside. That's my issue.
Please, Zuchomo.
Okay, there is a question on me which is asking about, whether the Naga government, Nagas were misunderstood, and whether that could be the reason for their continuing to extend AFSPA in Nagaland or in the Northeast. Well, yes, I will give 2 reasons for this. 2 observations. One is, yes, Naga society was totally misunderstood and was also totally misinterpreted from their narrow perspective of warrior tribes and terming the Nagas as savage and also uncivilized. In fact, this is where this connection came up, and hence misunderstanding also came up, and that also that leads to the militarization method to suppress the Naga movement for self-determination. Instead of understanding the Nagas, the way of life through dialogues and understanding. But I think, well, initially, yes, the reason for the militarization or the imposition of AFSPA is to suppress the Naga movement for self-determination. But I see little higher than that. I see a little higher than that, because one thing is that since Nagaland or the Northeast is situated, the region is situated in a very sensitive area, I think government of India is using AFSPA, in order to, for their, for the so-called the country's security interest. So because if social unrest is the reason for imposing AFSPA in the country or in the Northeast, then what about the Maoist movement that has been going on for in many states, and also like states like it is in Andhra Pradesh, Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Orissa, Telangana, and West Bengal. And even the former Prime Minister of India has very well quoted that one of the greatest threats for the security of the country is the Maoist, the movement of the Naxalites. But then we don't see the imposition of AFSPA in this country. So this makes me to think, the imposition of AFSPA in the Northeast is much beyond the social unrest. The central government of India definitely has some interest. That is the reason why it is being imposed there. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Zuchomo. So like I said, we are getting near the end, or we're past our projected time, but I'd love to give Niketu Iralu a chance to have some finer words as well. I'd like to keep a balance in our speakers and ability to say, and if you had something else you would like to share, Niketu, I'd love to give you the opportunity if everybody can stay on just for a few more minutes.
One point in connection with the calling it a mistaken identity. Many of us were very disappointed that the New York Times report on the event started with this subtitle was that it was a mistaken identity matter. And I think that did a disservice to the reputation of New York Times itself, and it hasn't helped anybody here. It doesn't help the government of India, because the government of India must be challenged to be truthful. And if we cannot trust the leaders are truthful, then there is no possibility of any proper growth. Only the worst things come out. The worst things are provoked out of us. I think number two, I feel one factor that we need to realize is that many of our communities, speaking for the Nagas, we are just emerging from years and years of isolation, because we are so isolated for centuries from the great sea trade routes and the great land trade routes. And so everything we do is new, and in the process, we create more problems than solve them. I think that is not to say that therefore others can do wrong things to us, but we should also take them into account in understanding ourselves, know ourselves, and see how we should be dealing, where we should be do things differently. That may not be popular, but otherwise, in the end, we will have nothing to build on in our society. Trust is the main thing that we should achieve together. Thank you.
Yes, Niketu, thank you very much. And I share so many of your concerns just at a personal level, but also think in terms of long-term resolutions and things. So much of what you said rings true, not just for conflicts in Nagaland, but I think could even apply to other abuses and human rights violations in other places that are going on. And we need to learn from all of these about the best mechanisms for responding. So I would like to offer this opportunity because there were a number of questions. I couldn't get to everything, so I apologize to all of the audience who signed in today, which I should let everybody know. There were over 100 people who signed into this talk today. So to me, that is a really exceptional sign of both interest in this issue and also, I think, a desire to learn more about it. And so I would like to offer the opportunity that the Asia Center, perhaps we can put up something on our website connected to this event. If all of you on the panel could send us any book recommendations, articles that you think are significant for this issue, because, really, as Niketu had pointed out, we are so largely dependent upon Western media, but at least for daily consumption. I mean, we all know that there's better sources that are out there and we should be searching for them. But because when you get a headline like what appeared in the New York Times, it drives a kind of perception in the U.S. That has, I think, a large effect, and it's difficult to counter. So we can perhaps use our whatever ability we have to try to disseminate some information for you in terms of better sources of knowledge. So any book recommendations, article recommendations, and the like. And in addition to that, there have been some comments about how might people in the international community assist the efforts in Nagaland. If you have any resources for, I know all of you are part of these very important groups that many of you were the founders of and are still key members of. If you could send us some information about how people might contribute to the effort, either monetarily or through other efforts, we could also try to disseminate that information to everyone. I think today, at least, what we have been able to do with you all for today and with the community and the audience who signed in is to thank you all very much for both your inspiring work that you're doing in Nagaland, but also for taking the time to share your knowledge. It's really the kind of on-the-ground, intimate knowledge that you all have shared today that can really open our eyes to the real situation there and counter some of the misperceptions. And, I think when we're dealing with large governments and particularly militarized governments, there can be stories that are told or a facade that's built up that is very difficult to counter without a large megaphone and a voice. But while we don't maybe have that, what we can hopefully have is at least a voice that will help to contribute in some way. So that really is thanks to you all coming out and joining in from all across the world, actually, to help in this effort. So let me end by thanking you all once again. And it's been a real pleasure to host you. And Niketu, do you have a comment, please?
I just want to thank Bina Lakshmi very much for reaching out to us with such passion and conviction and understanding. Thank you so much,
Yes.
Bina. Thank you.
And what is Niketu's house?
Thank you, Bina. Yes.
What is Niketu's house called again? The house of
Listening.
Karnaki, that is in my language. Karnaki, a house for listening.
Wow. I almost want to call this series the House of Listening. I think that's such a wonderful name and concept as well. And it just captures so much of the spirit. But I'm so glad that you thanked Bina as well. And again, thank you so much, Bina. It's been so inspiring to be in conversation with you and collaborate, and appreciate all the efforts you did for this.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye, everybody. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.